behalf of the Town of Fayette Historical Society, I just want to welcome you to today's event on the Fayette Schoolhouses. Oh, thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. So this event is part of a program that's going to run throughout the year, celebrating the 225th anniversary of the forming of the Township of Fayette. And so the way the program will work today is we're going to start in here, for the first 45 or 50 minutes. I'm going to give a background talk on the development of education in Fayette and also identifying each of the one-room schoolhouses. At that point, we're actually going to transition out to one of the one-room schoolhouses, the Fayette number 14, which was the McDougal Schoolhouse, that was moved to the Romulus campus back in 1997 in anticipation of the 60th anniversary of the Romulus Central School. And so that was back in 1998, and here we are 27 years later, approaching the 87th anniversary of the Romulus School, and pretty soon they'll be celebrating 100. So this is exciting, a moment to be a part of all this. And I do want to recognize at the beginning two people. One is Lisa Freier, my aunt. She's actually manning the north side door, but she's been the caretaker of the school for a number of years here. It's her who goes out and cleans it and campaigns for it, and contacted me to allow this program to get developed. And so I want to thank her for all her efforts. And I also wanted to recognize my my grandfather's cousin Wanda Gall, who's with us. And my Aunt Lisa wanted to gotten you some flowers just to thank you for coming. And so Wanda,
thank you.
Wanda was one of the individuals who was involved back in that campaign back in the late 1990s to bring the school here, to preserve it. And she's also one of the students who attended school in the very schoolhouse that we're going to go into today. And so I'm very, very pleased to have you with us. Thank you very much. And so once again, don't hesitate to get up and get more to eat or drink during the talk or whatever you might need to do. But I'm going to go ahead and move into the program. There's a lot of material, and I'll be speaking a little bit quickly. Please interrupt if you have questions or comments about things you recognize, because this is, I wanted to have that kind of feel to it so we can share information together. As I was thinking about the talk, after researching the material, I was thinking of the way that I could best describe, or what message I would want Americans who are fighting for self-governance and independence. The plan for what would happen in new areas that were settled was already in the mind of these people who were trying to build a new republic. And so I don't have a ton of time to go over that part of the history of the development of the settlement plans, but I would say we could think about it this way. Think about it as two hands. On one hand, you had state government and leaders who were fighting a war for independence, who were recognizing what it took to build a republic and what it meant to have a new nation. And so they were developing plans. They were developing government structures, and New York State was one of those. And so as they were looking at settling this area, which they had acquired, they were making plans for how it would be laid out, how things would be paid for, how early roads would be developed, how people would get here, how schools would even be paid for. And on the other hand, you had the pioneer settlers who would come in. And these were people who also just went through a war, right? And also were fighting for a republic. And they were an educated group. There are some estimates that maybe 90% of the people in the mid-Atlantic states or into the Northeast were literate and educated. And so you have these pioneers that were generally coming from settled areas. So they knew what settled life was like. And you had a state government, on the other hand, that was trying to promote a way to bring these two things together. And I think when those two things came together, you end up with the success, the rapid success that happened in the township of Fayette. And so I just think that's something that's important to recognize. And I won't have a lot of time to go into it, but this map is what we call like the map of some of the military townships that were set up as payment for soldiers who fought during the Revolutionary War. And again, this isn't a haphazard process. Look at the mathematical way these were laid out. I mean, everything was done square, it was surveyed. Each of these military townships were divided up into 100 lots of 600 acres, and they had reserved within those lots a lot specifically to support the gospel in schools and also to support literature. So we're in the Romulus lot, and we think of Romulus as a town. It was also a military tract, which included what would be Romulus, what would be Varick, what would be Fayette. And lot 50 and 55, which would be in the Varick region along Seneca Lake, were 600-acre lots. So 1,200 acres the state set aside at the beginning, knowing they wanted to support literature, education, and the spread of the gospel. So again, we could go into a lot of this, and but to keep this an education talk, I've got to move forward. So this is a graph I made trying to look at the population in the township of Fayette over time. And one of the things that's remarkable is Fayette, again, we're at the 225th anniversary, it became an official town in 1800. And look at the rapid growth in the first 20 to 25 years. They're hitting over 3,000 people in the town by 1825, and not long after that it peaked, and that's as high or higher than we are even now, 225 years later. And so very, very, very rapid settlement. Again, I would say of these motivated kind of pioneering people who were generally, not exclusively, but generally coming from settled areas and bringing with them their ideas, their ideas about schooling and the like. So what's even more interesting is, I had to get the data for this from multiple sources to try to create this graph. This would be the ones who would be considered students during that time period. So if you go back to 1800 coming into 1820s, you're looking at 1,250 school-age children at the very beginning. That would be more than a third of the entire population of the town. And so if you were one of those early, kind of pioneering settlers coming in, you brought with you kids, or you had them as you got here, and this is something that would definitely affect the face of the town and its development, and so education would have been on the forefront of their mind. We'll look at what's going on here, the trends of this a little bit later in the talk. And again, if you have questions or comments, please feel free to let me know. So kind of moving forward into the early Fayette schooling. So you have settlers coming in, there's tracts of lands that need to be cleared, and in the very beginning, the early 1790s, people would have either taught at home or maybe merged with another family that was close, and at that point just did the best they can, because again, this is an educated population that's coming in. These parents had the access to education before they came here, and now they don't have it for their children, but they're thinking about it. And so early on, there would have been itinerant teachers amongst those people that came on. There would have been shops that were set up, and people actually rented rooms in small shops to hold schools. Nothing terribly, organized in terms of the local level. But again, remember, the military lots had assigned lots for the benefit of schooling, and so even early on, you see people assigned. 1796, Fayette, or what would become Fayette, had school commissioners. And whenever I read that data, I'm always surprised by it. I'm like, oh, you had school commissioners, you had highway superintendents, you had keepers of the poor, that early? This is a very educated, motivated population, and I just think it's something to recognize. So eventually log structures were built. The early schools were log structures. In Fayette, because this is a talk on Fayette, the earliest documented school that I'm able to locate is from a note in 1798. It would have been the Berg Log Schoolhouse, and that schoolhouse would have been on Canoga Road, near where the Partee Farm is, the old Hoster Farm, just before you reach the Seneca Stone Quarry. There's a little sign there today. I took the boys to take pictures. That's the sign. Now, that sign at that corner is actually to signify that a first Sunday school happened in that schoolhouse, and it's referred to as the Old Log Schoolhouse in 1819. So it probably preceded the date 1798, but at least the first reference we have to it is in 1798, when they were discussing roads in the government records. And the actual location, so this is if you go down Reed Road, which is a dead-end road. This is at the other end of Reed Road looking back. And so that schoolhouse probably sat somewhere in here. About midway is what the notes say. And as far as the Berg Cemetery is going north, that's probably along where some of the original roads were, even though it doesn't match our roads today. So, moving forward here. This is not from a Fayette school, but I wanted to give you a glimpse of what some of the early notes were. I've got notes from school districts once we hit 1850 and kind of beyond. I don't have any for Fayette from the early 1817s, but this is a note from a meeting. And if you notice, they're talking about repairs already to a schoolhouse that was built, this is 1817, so if it needs repairs, it was built before that. And they're going to bid it out, $11 for the repairs. They need new panes of glass, some new planks, a clay chimney. They need to stop up the cracks with the mud and put on a new roof. And so, again, it just gives us an idea of what's happening at a very, very early date. All right, so this is a little bit harder to digest, but I do want to spend at least 1 or 2 minutes on that left-hand stuff from New York State, okay? So in 1784, 1 year after the Revolution ends, right, we find the Treaty of Paris, we have the Board of Regents of the state of New York formed. And everyone here has had to deal with regents, right? You took regents exams in schools, you may have a regents diploma or not. Like, we talk about the regents. Even this talk that I'm giving you here today, the Fayette Historical Society is chartered by the Board of Regents. And when this, think about this, this is our New York government deciding that's important 1 year after the end of the Revolution. And so, again, I just trying to think back to what people were deeming important at the time. Now, when this was created, these guys were an all-powerful supergroup. The original intention was for the Board of Regents to literally be the board of directors for every single school, college, chartered organization that was ever going to exist in New York. So, you know, within a few years they changed that, and instead they charter it and approve and oversee. But these guys were going to be incredibly powerful. Again, 1795, even before Fayette becomes a town, the state is already deciding they want to support common schools. And they're going to allocate $50,000 a year. Now, there were still problems going on here, right? Like there was debts from the Revolution, things needed to be rebuilt. And here they are ponying out $50,000, which is a lot of money back then. 1805, a permanent common school fund, because this one ran out of money, is created by about 500,000 acres that the state had. That they said, we're going to sell these acres, we're going to put that money and invest it. And when that money reaches $50,000 again of investment income a year, we're going to start supporting the schools again. And so again, there's motivation here, there's intentionality, which is good to recognize. By 1812, they have their Common School Act because they're getting the money. And remember I told you there were 2 lots? There was a gospel school lot and a literature lot. I think it takes a lot to decide you're going to send 600 acres aside in every township simply to support literature. I think that's noble. For us in the Romulus Township, that literature fund supported the Union College in Schenectady. That's where the money went when that was sold. A little bit more on the dates. So by 1854, the state is getting much more involved, and they're establishing their own system to kind of regulate and supervise. Up until that time, the towns elected their own school commissioners, and they had a lot of authority to develop districts, to appoint teachers, to issue certificates. And in 1856, it became countywide. The compulsory attendance, so for kids that say, well, I have to go to school. 1874 was when they said you had to go through age 14. And if you were 8 years old, you had to be in school. By 1903, they had raised that to the age 16, and that's kind of where we are today. By 1913, they're really looking at consolidation of these one-room schoolhouses and pushing it. 1920, there were 10,000 school districts in New York State. Over 8,000 of them were one-room school districts. And you know, that's part of the history, but the state was looking at that point towards consolidation for a lot of different reasons. So this map, I got this actually at James Hicks, who was also involved in the movement of the school and studying the history of the one-room schoolhouses before he passed away. I got to meet with him and interview him, and this is a map he had. This is a common map from the 1870s of Seneca County. And I wondered, I was like, oh, why did he ruin this map by coloring it in? You know? But I understand now why, because each of these colors represent the outline of the individual school districts in Fayette. So of course he's going to color it in, because now think of how much easier it is to see where those boundaries were. So in 1813, we had 7 school districts in Fayette. By 1822, there were 12, and by 1842, we were already up to where we are today. Remember all those kids, they needed somewhere to go. And how were these things kind of set up? Well, you had to walk to the schoolhouse, right, Wanda? So how far do you want a child walking in either direction, morning or night, throughout the year? Roughly, these schoolhouses had to be every 6 miles or so. So nobody was walking more than 3 miles in any direction. And I had Mark, my son, juxtapose the Varick districts onto this map, because they're on separate pages. This is the line that would separate Fayette and Varick, the town line road. Some of these districts crossed because it made sense based on where the communities developed. So even though you know, the town line was separate, the district crossed, and this kind of shows that when you marry up the maps together. Today, I'm going to mostly talk about the Fayette districts. I'll mention a little bit about some of the joint districts. It happened in Seneca Falls too, but I don't have that map up there. This map. This is a map that Walter Gable passed out to some historian people a few years before he passed away, and I hadn't seen it before. It's a 1933 map, but it got really interesting because if you blow it up and you look at the what's communicated on this map, the question is, what do all these numbers mean? Well, I live right here, so I knew that meant the old Cooneytown Schoolhouse. And very quickly I was able to realize that all of these represent the school districts in Fayette. Interestingly, McDougal was missing. I had to add that on myself. I don't know why. And the Ringer School District was missing. I don't know if that's just a printer error or what. But this map you have on your tables. And so you may want to look at that as we get towards the school district so you know where we are. Because even I had never identified some of these school districts before and the schoolhouses or their sites that may remain. So moving forward here, the local district organization. So early on, the towns had the authority to create their districts and to appoint their own teachers and to decide those boundaries. And it was, again, very intentional, very organized. Annual meetings were held, and they wrote the notes of these meetings, and we have a lot of them. Every year they would elect a trustee, sometimes 2 or 3, and even stagger them. So they wouldn't lose institutional knowledge, right? That's why you would stagger your trustees. They would elect a clerk, a tax collector, because a part of the funding that we'll go into was happening very much at the very local level. And they would hire their own teachers, determine how much people were going to pay in that district. And then the tax collector had to go out and collect the taxes themselves. So think about having to justify your expenses as a school, right? If you had to go to your neighbor and say, I need $20 in 1826, you know, to pay for schooling. And occasionally they would have to do special taxes. They need to paint the school this year. They need to redo the porch. They were buying brooms a lot. Let's just look at that later. So one of the, this is a good point to mention here. Sometimes people say, how good was the education in the one-room schools? I would argue that it was, for the most part, outstanding. In Varick, okay, I know we're Fayette, we're going to talk about Varick. Diedrich Willers Sr., who I've talked about last year, he was the superintendent for the town. So you've got this educated minister who speaks like 4 different languages, you know, who's educating future theologians as the supervisor. At that same time, you had Diedrich Willers Jr., who was writing about, you know, ancient Greek history at the age of 13 as one of the one-room schoolhouse teachers. At the same time, you have Isaac Philip Roberts, who would go on to be the dean of the College of Agriculture at Cornell in the Barrytown School District, but on the Varick side, teaching. And so these people were getting, I believe, a fantastic, everything I'm seeing is they're getting a fantastic education. You know, at that time, I don't know if you could have gone anywhere in the country and had better teaching than having, you know, at that time under the Willers and the Roberts and those guys.
Do we know how many students were in each schoolhouse?
We do. It's coming. It is coming. It's coming. Yeah. So
it probably, sort of counter your statement you just made, it probably varied a fair amount though from school to school, because each one of those would have a different teacher, and we know some teachers are better than others, et cetera. So.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. So there's going to be variability. But I think when you have a supervisor like DJ Quiller Senior's, you would imagine he would weed out the people that weren't doing a good job, if it was possible. And I think the early settlers had a high view of education, very high view, and I don't think they would have hired. But yes, there are examples where school teachers did not last very long. There are. So funding, again, we talked about the gospel school lot. So that was 600 acres that was set aside. Initially, people leased it, and some money was coming in, to the town from that. But in 1817, our lot number 50 was sold, and the money divided between Romulus, which existed at the time as a town, and Fayette. And Fayette's portion was just over $7,000. And so in 1817, Fayette had $7,000 to invest, and then from that interest, they were able to support the local schools. Interestingly, all the way into the late 1800s, they honored that principal. That principal was still $7,000. It wasn't spent down. They only spent the income from it. And important people that you guys would recognize, like Minders. Hummus Minders was one of the commissioners of the gospel in school lots. And so it was, again, there was money there. Robert Rose from Rose Hill, he was a school commissioner back in 1812 for Fayette. So again, I think they took it very, very seriously. Very seriously. So here's the dreaded tax warrant. This one is not from Fayette. This one's from Lodi, but it was the only place I could find an original warrant. And this is from 1889, saying that, hey, if you're the tax collector, it is your job to take what those assessed values are and go and get that money for your school district. And that would have been a tough job to do. This is actually a list from the parent school district. This would have been on south of Canoga, not far from our house. And I don't have a lot of information from that school, which is why I want to include this here. But here's a list of everybody. Here's their real and personal property that they own, and then what their taxes were going to be. Because they needed to raise $120 in 1885 to cover their portion of funding for their school district. And so it would be very, very personal. Very personal. Very local decision making. How are these things organized, like at the school level? Well, I don't know if you guys have seen these manuals before. This is from 1866. This is the oldest one I've got. This one I think is from 1902. But these were provided by the state, and they were basically like a self-help manual, like a one-shop, do-it-all kind of collection to run your school. It would include all the things you needed to know what the laws were for that year. It included perforated teachers' contracts. You could just fill in the name and then the amount and pull it out so that they could be paid. It included lists of where to put the pupils and their attendance records. And so it basically was just a how-to manual, which probably worked really, really well for the time, so that everybody could kind of benefit from a common practice. I will say here that, does anybody know when certification of teachers, by education, began? One of the things I find remarkable is I feel like the more I research this, the more I think we're living in the 1920s. I think we are still living in that same era. All of these things that started then are happening now. So in 1936, they required teachers to have 4 years of education in order to get a certificate to teach. And then very shortly thereafter, you had to have the 5th year, which is what we're going through now. And a lot of the same things with funding. It's very similar. So once again, I'm just going to remind us, this is the number of Fayette kids. 1,200 kids is more than in the entire Seneca Falls School District today. And they were just in Fayette. Just remarkable numbers of kids. So let's hone down on that a little bit more, Rosalinda. So this is a graph that Abigail and I made. We went down to Interlake Historical Society, and Chelsea helped us at the library, and we went through a bound volume of data from school districts from 1885 to 1912. So it doesn't cover all the way back, but at least it's 1885 to 1912. And it had every single school district, how many kids were in the district, how many attended, their aggregate days of coming, how the money was kind of being divided up. And so these represent all 16. It's got to be hard to see from way back there. But this top one, and I kept the original spelling in the book, but this is Schoolhouses for the south side of Waterloo. They obviously were the largest one where the village was settled. And then these are all the individual. There's the Berg at green, McDougal Schoolhouses, the orange, Yost Schoolhouses down here. And so, you know, you have some schools that are just always small, some schools that bounce around a little bit. But this is from 1885 to 1912. And if we blow up in there a little bit more, you can see a little bit closer. Each one of these is a number of the students. So the Yale, the Lurch area schools in the 70s. McDougal's is bouncing around in the 40s and 50s. And then some of these are, you know, in the lower 20s or even less. By the time you get out to 1912, the Cooneytown School, where I live, had no students. They had 6 the year before, and then it lists none. And I think it's because they contracted with someone else, and the state or the county commissioner could do it. Anybody notice this blip here? That is the Yellow Tavern School, and that's 1889, and it's going from 45 kids to 85 kids in 1 year. Now, we were trying to figure out what's going on. One is, was it a transcription error on my part? Did I put the wrong number in? Because Abigail and I had to write all these down, and it's not. So then it could have been a transcription error for the superintendent who did it. But if you notice, there is dips in some of these other schools that are nearby. So like Rose Hill goes down at the same time. And so I don't know if there's a teacher issue here, or if there was a community issue where parents weren't getting along, you know, something was happening at the school district level. But it would only last you for a year, and then it goes back to normal. Kind of interesting. All right. So some of that data Abigail and I collected, we tried to figure out, I've always heard that kids weren't always in school. And you could use the data in that bound volume to figure this out. 100% here would be if everybody who was in the school came to school every day. So this is taking the aggregate days that a student was sitting in a seat for any one of these schools, comparing it to the 160 or 170 days of the school year. In the Bell School District, so it's number one, 35%. So that means if you had 30 kids in school on any given day, there were only 10 kids in chairs. That's kind of remarkable. Some of the bigger schools like Schoolhouses were a bit bigger, Canoga, which is Hamlet, they tended to have a little bit higher numbers. But on average, you're looking at what, 45% here? So even though a school district may have had 70 kids registered, there's a chance there's no more than 30 kids there on any given day. At least in this time frame. Do you know there's one time frame that's worth mentioning that's completely different from that, which I think supports my initial thesis that people were very heavily interested in education early on. In the 1820s, especially if you look at the McDougal school numbers and others, these school districts were running at 90 to like 110% capacity. So of the available kids that were there, there was somebody coming into those seats. And again, I think they really valued the education. Obviously, it drifted off by the time you got to the late 1800s. All right, so we're going to jump into, how are we doing on time here? 29 minutes. Okay, I think we can make it. We're going to jump into each of the school districts that I could find. So this is a picture today of the Bell School District number 1. So the Bell's district would be up off Marshall Road and Knight Road. Did anybody know this was a schoolhouse? I didn't know. Wanda, did you know? Yeah, did you know?
I knew it was a schoolhouse, but
Okay, we hadn't talked about it. Anybody else? No? You know, and it looks like this could have been a schoolhouse. The new owners are actually painting it red. I don't know a lot about it, but again, I think a talk like this is good because it's kind of reinvigorating that knowledge back into the community because some of these structures still exist. Number two is the Schoolhouses, or the South Village of Waterloo. I didn't have pictures of this, but again, I'm coming from a place where, you know, I was trying to find this knowledge on my own, but I did remember this 1870s bird's eye view map of Waterloo, and I knew it had to be on the Fayette side of the river. And so I looked and I said, wait a minute, that looks like it's identifying a schoolhouse right there. And again, at this time, Fayette was running that schoolhouse, not Waterloo, because it was in the town of Fayette. So if you blow it up, look at that. There's a schoolhouse sitting right there on the edge of River Road and Grove Street. And Huff Street, which is Huff Street now, was a mill race at the time. This is from the 1870s. And then right before I had to give this talk a few days ago, I was able to find this 1886 picture of that schoolhouse. So this schoolhouse, this brick two-room schoolhouse here, this was built in 1845, and Becker mentions it in his History of the Village of Waterloo. But it even gets better than that, because a little bit later they actually expanded it and put the second floor on, and he had a picture of that too. But again, look at it, it's identified as School District Number 2, Town of Fayette. Yeah. So I think that's incredible. Did anybody know that was sitting there? Or I'm sorry, that it used to sit in that location? Cindy, you did.
Yeah, it wasn't, and it was there up until maybe 20 years ago.
Wow, so there may be more modern pictures of it.
I think so, because I think that's the one, I think at one time the Seneca County Youth Bureau was in there.
Oh, I think you're thinking of the Ward School
On the other side.
on the other side. Yeah.
This
That
is
would,
on-
this is on the Fayette side.
No, this would be, it was on this side of the river.
Oh, it was? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's look into it together. Because I'm learning a ton as I went through this. So let's go a little bit further. So this is that land today. I had, I think Mark, you went with me. I had to make my kids take all these sorts of pictures and help me in the library. So this is where it's sitting. And then again, this is River Road. This is Grove, and this is what Google would show it as today. Sitting right. This is where it would have been. There's the lot. So, and we got 16 of these to do, so I got to keep moving. So, schoolhouse number 3 was the Rose Hill School District, Kine Road, and today that's a private home. You guys have seen that? It's a beautiful brick structure. But look at this I think this is a 1905 picture. What do you notice about the schoolhouse? Do you guys notice anything? Those who know what it looks like today?
Yeah.
What do you notice about in this picture?
Yeah, I don't remember now, but
Oh.
I know that, because I've seen it.
You've seen it. It's only one room. It's a two-room house. So I was like, all right, so at some point after 1905, they expanded it. And I essentially was able to find a picture. Here you can see, so this is after the expansion. Look at how the windows are different. Look at how the roof is different. And then this would have been that tower and entrance that they had on a lot of, fancy schools that were made of brick. We see on a bunch of the other ones. And it now is embedded inside the building. Yeah, I had no idea it was ever built as a one. You didn't either, right? Yeah. So again, you learn these things. It's really cool. The Yellow Tavern School. So coming down Yellow Tavern, that was school district number 4. This is the modern picture. Again, it's a schoolhouse that was converted into a house. And I don't have a great picture of it. I'm thankful to have what I have. This is a 1936 photo identified. This is the side of that schoolhouse. But I don't have any larger photo of it. So now we're at district number 4. We're going to keep moving. We're going to go to district number 5. So we're still, now we're on Yost Road, coming down Yellow Tavern Road. This is still there. We drive by this all, right? Everybody drives by this. Yeah. And so it's there. Boy, wouldn't I love to save that building too.
Yeah.
Because it's a brick and it's in a nice spot. So that's what it looks like today. This is a picture, I think, from 1913, which shows the same building and students. Okay, now we're at number 6. Am I going too fast, guys?
No.
Is this okay? Stop me if you have questions or.
Well, an observation,
Yeah.
you're talking about the investment in schools. I mean, most of these are brick structures, which is significantly more investment than throwing up a wood frame structure, I would think.
It really is. And I was under the misconception that a lot of these brick structures were built late. If you look even back to 1856, they were already converting into brick prior to the Civil War. So it is an investment. It is. Berg Schoolhouse. So this is where the Fayette Mennonite Fellowship is on 414. And for a time, that building was actually incorporated into their fellowship hall, and then they added, and then they ended up taking that centerpiece out, right? Maybe 10 years ago, is that or so?
Maybe even longer, but yeah.
Yeah, maybe even longer. But again, a really beautiful schoolhouse. Again, that's just where it is on 414. You get just to have some of the maps. Really beautiful. So let's use the Berg as an opportunity to explore those manuals I talked about a little further. So this is that 1865-66 manual that the school teacher would have been using to list the students, list the parents, list the dates they entered school, and then record their attendance. And this one, I found this one at the Seneca Falls Historical Society, the bottom of the box. And I was so happy to find it because it illustrated an important thing. Had you guys heard that the schools in the way back, so prior to 1885, were holding school winter, summer, not using the words fall and spring. I've heard that, but I never found any documentation. In 1865 at the Burke Schoolhouse, you want to guess what date school started? Guess what month? November 20th. Yeah, after harvest, Rosalinda, right? So you've got a lot of these farm kids, and so they're literally running school only in the winter. November, and then the summer session started in April. Completely reversed from what we're doing, not completely, but different from what we're doing today. And they used to, I saw references, look for male teachers for those winter sessions, because that's when most of the older boys would come to school. They wouldn't go to school the whole year, but they would come during that winter session, and these would be the older ones, you know, the teenagers. And so you can see in some of the schoolhouse notes where they're like, we're looking for a male teacher for the winter session. This is interesting. So there were 63 pupils, I think, for the winter session. For this summer session, there were 54. Let's look up a little bit closer about all these marks. So you see here, this 17-week school session, you got somebody who attended 3 days, came in the last, 2.5 weeks of school. But you've got someone who was here almost the whole time and only attended 2 days. Maybe the first 2 days of the session. And I used to think teachers took attendance because they had to, various things like that. They were getting paid based on these scratches. So again, those aggregate numbers I used to show you the percentage of kids attending, they were coming because the superintendents, either of the town or then later of the county for the school commissioners, were figuring this out to the thousandth decimal point of school attendance, because they were multiplying it by a factor to determine how much school aid they were getting. And so these things were very, very important. But I was really happy to see the winter school session, to see school starting in November. Kind of cool. All right, we got to keep moving, or we're going to run out of time. So this has been this is the Beach Schoolhouse, school district number 7. This was a joint district with Seneca Falls. This is on the Airport Road, or Martin Road, near the Finger Lakes Regional Airport. And I have to tell you, I have driven on this road growing up thousands of times. Never once have I heard anyone mention, this is 2025, that this house was a schoolhouse. And look at how closely it resembles the 1941 picture. And so anyways, I'm happy to share that knowledge with you. I'm happy to learn it myself. This picture I've got courtesy of Cindy, and it's your cousin Harold Litzenberg, or how's that?
I got it from my cousin.
Harold, right.
Harold
And
Litzenberg, because my Aunt Mary
taught.
My Aunt Mary taught there from 1938 to 1942.
Yeah. I'm going to show just a few more pictures that were provided by your family, Cindy. So these are some pictures of her. Is Mary Alice was her name? Is that right? Or Mary?
Yeah, her name was Mary Alice, but we never called her Mary Alice. But people in school, apparently she was known to her students as Miss Mary Alice Trout. Yeah.
Okay, so here's her in the school. Of course, this is 41, so you can see there's already, electricity and things like that. But again, kind of a window into a school that I didn't even know existed, even though I drive by it all the time. Isn't that great? Okay, moving now, because we got to get to 16. So number 8, this is the Chaffin-Cosat School. This would have been north of Canoga on 89, where Mo and Keith Titwa have their property today. That building is no longer standing. I did find this in our archives listed as Trouts. Are you able to recognize anybody in that, Cindy? Or?
Well, I know my Uncle John went there.
Okay. This one is also interesting because Cyrus Garnsey Jr. and Cyrus Garnsey, Sr., who had the Garnsey farm right near this one, were involved, and so the notes of the meetings are great, and we have the 1850 book. And so here is a expense report from 1858, and they don't always list the expenses for the year, which is a great window in. They needed to raise $102 to pay the teacher. Is that a good teacher's salary? That's good. No. But at the time, and they weren't holding school 12 months. Sometimes it was 8 months. They would decide how many they were going to do for. And so the public money come from the gospel lots or coming from the state was $70. They had to raise another $32 on that tax rate bill amongst the community to pay for it. And then they would separate out other expenditures, and they would have to raise that money separately. So $7 to paint the schoolhouse, $16 for the paint, Building fires, 50 cents. I did read that sometimes over the weekends they would keep the fires going and they would pay someone to do it. Wood, and then sawing the wood. You know, early on, people donated the wood as kind of part of bringing your scholar to the school. But as time went on, even in the 1850s, the school districts were buying it. And there's that broom again. My goodness, I don't know who was selling brooms in Fayette, but they were making a killing because everybody is buying brooms constantly. And then there were 2 unrecorded expenses, but these guys, you know, listed it. There's no expense report. Unless they bought more brooms and I didn't know about it. They bought 3 brooms. So now we're moving into Canoga. So I don't have any old pictures of Canoga, but I feel like we should in our archives, but I didn't come across any. This is the current Canoga schoolhouse right across from the firehouse. Canoga didn't get a school district until 1830, which is much later than I would have thought. And some interesting things about Canoga is I have a notebook, it's on some of the tables back there you can look at, of their school reunions. So just to give you a sense of how much people felt connected to their school. Even in the late 1800s, they were having school reunions. But in 1940, Canoga started, 100 people showed up on a Saturday to have a school reunion from that little house. And they organized themselves and they sang songs, and it meant a lot to them. For those of us who like to study history, there's a terrible thing in that notebook though, because for the first couple years of the reunion, they recounted the history of the Canoga schoolhouse, its formation, all of its teachers, and the secretary's note said, "I don't know shorthand, I couldn't record it." So I'm looking at that and I just want to cry and look, because why did she write something down? The only thing they did write down is there's no bell tower here, but the kids wanted a bell and they didn't have a bell. And so 2 sisters and a friend sold lemonade, it seems like for some years, to get the money for the bell. And once they got the bell, they shamed the school district into building the bell tower. I don't know what happens with the bell, but I wish there could have been so many more anecdotes, and we don't know. This is another piece of that self-help manual for all the teachers. They could fill this out. This was to report the end of the school year, and it just gives us a chance to look at some of the things they're studying. So I got to draw your guys' attention here. One of the first thing here is silent reading. So they're getting a grade. How do you grade somebody for silent reading? I don't know, but look at this. Most people got 100, but some people got an 88 and an 82 and an 85. So we just have to imagine how you grade silent. Does anybody have an idea how you would grade silent reading?
Test them afterwards.
But reading is in here as a separate.
Comprehension.
Yeah, maybe it is. I felt like it was in here further, but silent reading. But some people did not do well in silent reading. That's great. Oh, and I'll point this out at the end here. On Fridays were a different kind of day in these schools. Fridays, I don't know if it was that way, Wanda, when you went to school or not, but Fridays were a day where they did things like nature study, or they did music, or they did, here they're studying agriculture, which we're just trying to get back into the schools again. So I find that great. One last tidbit about the Canoga Schoolhouse. We had a bird club in 1941, and we have the notes from it, okay? And I have not figured out their cipher for recording who is present. It seems like the date you last came as a member, that date gets put in the next time you're here. I don't know if they're trying to hide or code something here. I figured out. But one interesting, so it's a bird club. So they're drawing birds, they're studying birds, they're reporting on birds. And then this picture shows up in the journal. What do you guys think that picture's showing?
Pheasant hunting.
It's pheasant hunting. You got the dog, you got the rifle, you got the pheasant going in the air. So immediately after this, there's a resolution in the bird club that says in order to be a member of the bird club, you have to vow not to shoot birds. Isn't that great? And it's all in children's writing. It's all kids' notes.
Do they list species?
Yeah, there were some here. Blue jay, snowflake, robin. I can't read them all. Can you read those, Josiah?
Nope.
Nope. Okay. Mockingbird. Yeah. It's kind of interesting. And they did more fun things with it. Eventually they bought a baseball bat and a glove so they could play baseball. So it's just a way to engage kids, and this was on Friday afternoons. Okay, schoolhouse number 10. This is the parent schoolhouse. This is on 89, going towards Varick. This schoolhouse no longer exists. And I don't have much information about it at all. Although I I'd say that maybe it could go into the runnings for the smallest school district in terms of number of kids from what I've looked at. It was very, very small. Cooneytown, this is my favorite schoolhouse. So this is that drawing that's in the Seneca Falls Historical Society of it before they tore it down. This is a picture of, this family emailed me maybe a year ago and said, it said something about Fayette, could it be our Fayette? Or is it like Fayette, Ohio, or something like that, or Pennsylvania? And this is definitely the Fayette from 1915. She knew the teacher and family member who, her family was the teacher. And I was so thrilled she sent me that picture. This is that same area today, and you can see all the trees. They planted trees for Arbor Day, and the trees remain. And this apple tree that's still there now, because I just took this about a year ago, is the same apple tree here. This picture is from the Delvin Pictures of Seneca County book, and this was before it was taken down, probably in the early 1980s. But I think that apple tree was present in this picture, but I've cropped it out. If it is, this is the apple tree we should go after, isn't it? Because this is at least 125 years old. And so we probably could figure out the variety and see if it's one of the older varieties that, this is where you find old varieties of apple trees, right? So another rabbit trail to go down. All right, we're getting close here. Only got a couple more minutes. This is school district number 12. This was on Leader Road where the S-turns are. There's a new house being put there now, right? This was referred to as the Bachman or the Trout. There's a few people here we can identify, like for some of us that are older, that's Luther and Elsie Zwick. This is Gordon Lambert. If we can, I think those are the ones I know off the top of my head. Sweets Hill. So, how many of you guys have driven on Sweets Hill? Some of us. I don't know that much about Sweets Hill, but this is great about being in the Historical Society. So Peter Bierce sent John an email, and then John passed it on to me saying, hey, I've got this picture. This is my grandmother, who we knew as Mrs. Allen. What was her first name? Her first name.
Eleanor.
Eleanor, yes. And so he says, she's here, it's at Sweets Hill. I've looked on Google, I can't find anything on Sweets Hill. So I'm driving on Sweets Hill, I'm looking for ruins. But then I remembered this map. And if you guys look where 13 is on that map, it is not on Sweets Hill. It's on Leader Road. It's near Sweets Hill, but it's not on Sweets Hill. And I'm driving up and down Sweets Hill asking everybody I know, is there a schoolhouse here? Well, it gets better because not only was it not on Sweets Hill, this is a picture from 1909, it's not gone. It's still there. This is Watts Road, this is Olszewski Road, and that's it. It's still here. And then after I jogged your memory about it, you're like, oh, that's right, I heard, right? You knew.
Yeah.
Who was the family that renovated it into a?
Well, Wilson, but then Robson.
Robson, yes, yeah, there it still exists. So just another kind of cool connection. In the back, I've got pictures and some documents from schoolhouses and some of the journals I'm talking about. I have the 1914 complete set of trustees' reports to the state for the Fayette schoolhouses, which is a treasure. I don't know why we have it, but we have it. And so this is the Sweets Hill, so I made a copy of this for Peter when he emailed us about it. So you can just learn a little bit more about what it was like for his grandmother. But lots of interesting things they would report, like how much money they spent, how much the teacher made, what's the value of the schoolhouse, and then a little bit further here, how many boys, how many girls, keeping that attendance thing about the aggregate number of days so they can get paid. And then a few more interesting things about, are they following the compulsory school law? Give the number of children of school age in your district vaccinated. See, things don't change. We are still living in 1920, guys. And in so many ways. But does anybody know what vaccine came out in 1914? That's early.
Smallpox?
No, they were, no, not smallpox. Polio? No, polio came out much later. Who said diphtheria? Diphtheria vaccine came out, and that was a real disease. So one of the joint school districts is the one on Varick Town Line Road. It's number 6 for Varick. It would be, before you got to the hamlet. That's the Deal Schoolhouse, and this is just a tragedy. Diphtheria struck that Deal family, and 4 out of the 5 kids that went to that schoolhouse died in a matter of weeks. And so, yeah, the state's interested in whether, if you have access to the diphtheria vaccine, have you taken it? But that wiped out an entire generation of kids in one family, right there on the border of Varick and Fayette. So, all right, now we're getting to the McDougall Schoolhouse. As far as I can tell so Chris Manasseri, who was superintendent of Romulus, he was very involved in writing and documenting the history of the McDougall Schoolhouse as he could find it. My Aunt Lisa provided me a lot of his papers and stuff. And there just are not a lot of pictures, right, Wanda, of the McDougall Schoolhouse?
Not too many.
This is like one of the only ones that there are of it in sight early on. This is after it's been moved here, to the Romulus district, or Romulus school. And just a few things, we'll talk more about it out there, but that district was formed early, again, where all those people were coming in the 1820s. First classes in 1824, anywhere from 3 months to 10 months, 90 students in 1826. The fire marshal would have a fit, right? I mean, this is not good. And then it held classes, I think, until 1946, right, when it was centralized, and then it was moved here as part of the 60th anniversary celebration. All right, just literally 1 or 2 more moments. This is the district number 15. This building is no longer standing, but here's a picture, again, of students from 1914. And if we had time, a few of these were really fortunate. People have identified, various people in the classes. But there's always people. Look at him with his hand up. And I don't know if you noticed in one of the other pictures, there's a guy with a broken leg on crutches. I was thinking of you, Josiah. What was going on in those moments that were captured. The very last school district that I'll talk about is the Ringer School District. So this is going way out on, that's still River Road, right? Yes. And it's by Noss Road. And this is all there is. And I'm convinced this is the spot, because if you look at the old maps that identify it, you can see a stream that does a huge bend right in here, and the schoolhouse was sitting right in front of it. And this is a very hard to farm small field. This is probably where it was, but I don't have. Does anybody have any information on Ringer?
I remember when that one was still standing.
You do? How long ago?
I think it was after the Mennonites bought the farm across that has the stone house.
So there may be pictures somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay, we got to get involved with people from that part of Fayette to find out, because, so am I in the right spot, Cindy?
Yeah, right where is that, I can't remember what creek that is.
I meant to look it up.
Is that Kendrick's
It's
Creek?
Is it Kendrick's Creek?
Is that Kendrick's Creek there? Yeah, and everybody, I mean, in the day, used to go there and fish. My grandparents used to go there and fish. And I remember that school, I mean, the school was like, a skeleton at that time, but, I still remember it.
You've seen it. Okay, excellent, excellent. So there were the joint districts. I'm only going to mention these two because these are right on the border between Varick and Fayette. This is Varick number 6. This is the Dale School. This is the one that had all the kids die of diphtheria before the vaccine. And then this is the one that was in Hamlet of Fayette, but on the Varick side near the Stone Church. This school district stayed as a one-room schoolhouse until like 1961. It fought the consolidation until it was ordered by the state that they could no longer do it. And I think it had grades 1 through 6. There's a really touching poem I have, I don't have it in this, of one of the last teachers who wrote about how proud she was of the school and that it was theirs. And so that was kind of the community feeling. So what happened? Well, we've already talked about it a little bit through the talk. Population plummeted, right, of students. The state started exerting a little bit more control about what was happening and demanding certain things. Like eventually they said you could only have a one-room schoolhouse if you had 1 acre of land. So some of these little corner schoolhouses that didn't have it, where are you going to get another acre? It's impossible. It's impossible. They were, in their notes, they're talking about trying to buy land to save the schoolhouse. Once they required the teachers to have that 4th and then 5th year of education, these mandated the minimum salary. So that, again, made it harder for the schools. They had mandatory teaching requirements that started coming in, and then we became a much more mobile society. Kids didn't have to walk to school anymore. You could get on a bus. And there were these academies like at Ovid and Seneca Falls and Waterloo. Well, they became more unionized schools where kids had more opportunities for high school, and people wanted it. I saw one note, the Beach Schoolhouse, which was the one that Cindy's family was, they bought their own bus prior to consolidation to bus the older kids to the high school. Could you imagine the families on Airport Road buying a bus? own bus to move kids. So I think they were doing what they could to keep it going, but eventually it couldn't go. I want to mention this though. One thing I was absolutely clear was that there was no decrease in cost after consolidation in terms to the taxpayer. More opportunities, but at a higher cost. It didn't save anybody money. And this is actually when it happened. This is actually the certificates of consolidation when Fayette lost school district 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11 all at the same time and consolidated with Seneca Falls. And I assume the same things would have happened into Romulus and Waterloo. But for example, this is that very last note for the schoolhouse number 8, the COSAD schoolhouse. This is the secretary, the clerk, writing her notes. And this is the very last entry in 1950, and I want to blow it up for you guys to read. It says, "Thus ends the little schoolhouse and the individuality of the school district, of inestimable value to the community." It's signed Arlene Lewis Inshaw, clerk. Did anybody know Arlene Inshaw? No? So, yeah. I think there's a lot to be proud of for these school districts. I think they really valued education, and then under the circumstances, and at the time when the state was helping, they did a great job. And I'm happy to have presented. I hope I haven't made any errors. I've shared what I've been able to learn, and we'll go after this over to the actual McDougal Schoolhouse. But if you have any other questions, otherwise I thank you for your attention.